Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really excited about this event. My name is Delaney Markham. I'm a rising junior at Trinity College, and last fall I founded Trinity Women in Business, and we got that up and running this spring. And tonight is our first event, which is very exciting. And so Trinity Women in Business aims to support young women and all students with goals of careers in business. And we want to do that by creating a space that encourages and empowers young women to pursue those careers and to cultivate a network that helps guide their careers through mentorship, educational forums, and other activities. So as I said, tonight is our first event and our first collaboration with the Women's Leadership Council. And we hope to work together many more times in the future. I'm now going to pass off to Julie Gionfriddo, who is our moderator this evening. Julie graduated from Trinity in 1995 with a degree in economics and received her master's from Trinity in 2005 in economics. She's worked in finance for 25 years and is co-chair of the Women's Leadership Council.
Thank you so much, Delaney, and thank you all for being here. Welcome. Delaney, just two quick questions for you before I launch into introductions here. What is your major and where are you from?
My major is also economics, and I'm from Winchester, Massachusetts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting the Women's Leadership Council to be part of your first or our first event together in the Women in Business first program here. The Women's Leadership Council is an excellent Trinity alumni organization, and we are very happy to co-sponsor the event. For those of you who are on this Zoom or call and are new to the Women's Leadership Council, we provide a network of support for all Trinity women to connect with each other and other female identifying students. The Women's Leadership Council was founded by female trustees in 2010 at the end of the celebration of 40 years of coeducation. The council has grown from that 40 original members to close to 800 women across the country today. And programs like the one today are on topics for women, by women, and we're always open to new ideas and suggestions for future topics and speakers. I hosted an event like this at lunchtime on wellness earlier in the month, and always great to do this. And the nice thing about Zoom is that we can participate from wherever we are, and that's kind of been a silver lining of COVID for our organization and our programming. And so really happy that we could all be together via Zoom tonight. And if you're interested in membership for the Women's Leadership Council, it's very easy. So in addition to participating in programs like this one or our Lunch and Learn programs, we ask that our members support the college with philanthropic support in any amount and anything that is meaningful to you. And so the Women's Leadership Council is something I've been involved in for many years now. I am a co-chair today. I started out with the Women's Leadership Council back in 2013 and was really happy to get engaged back with Trinity. President Joanne Berger-Sweeney was coming on, and it was just a really nice time to participate and to have that women's network. I thought was wonderful, and really at that time got engaged with students on campus through venture and other programs that the Women's Leadership Council has the ability to participate in. So if you'd like to become involved, Melissa Regan is here on this call coordinating for us. Please contact her, and then you can be a part of the organization and our programming. So what I'll do next is start our panel. We've got our panelists here. They'll share their stories. And then after that, there'll be time for Q&A. And then also, just so the folks on Zoom know, we've got the Q&A function. You could load your questions on there as you have them, and we'll ask them probably around 7:30. So I guess I'll kick off with my background, share my Trinity story, and then go out to our panelists. So as Delaney mentioned, I was an undergrad at Trinity in economics way back. I graduated in 1996, and it was a different time in finance for women. I was one of very few women in my econ classes. which I enjoyed very much. I was actually very surprised that there were so few women. I guess that was kind of the beginning of the rest of what my experience would be like in economics and finance. And so really enjoyed the coursework at Trinity, did internships, took advantage of everything Trinity had to offer, studied abroad in Vienna, again, Eastern European economies. I was on the swim team as a diver, and just found Trinity all around to be a great experience. And when I was going off into the world of work and interviewing, I was looking at analyst programs and trying to figure out how I could learn kind of the real world in finance, and was connected to Landmark Partners, which is a global private equity firm. They did secondaries, which is a niche in private equity and venture capital. And they acquire interests in funds and limited partnerships. And it's a specific piece of finance, but it was really interesting, got to know the whole landscape of VC and PE throughout the US, and also the institutional investor world. You'll hear a bit more about some of those topics from our panelists. I spent 18 years there, was a vice president, and when I left, and then went to a venture capital firm in New York City called Apple Tree Partners. It was $1.5 billion fund. It was focused on healthcare investing. I worked on the healthcare services team and invested in a portfolio of companies. We also had life sciences and med tech. Really interesting experience. Left New York. I've always lived in the Hartford area. So pre-COVID, came back to Glastonbury, Connecticut, reconnected actually with a Trinity alum who is a partner at a CPA firm, a large CPA firm nearing 100 people in Glastonbury, Connecticut. And not only do they do your typical tax and accounting and audit work, they have an advisory practice. And so one of the things I'm doing today is working with companies that need advisory work. If they're an early stage or startup company, kind of how do they approach the market? How do they raise capital? To companies that are looking to exit, and the CEO kind of needs a sounding board to run a process. And so that's FML and here in Connecticut. And that's what I'm doing today. So, you know, that's my story and my background. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give their background. And, you know, from there, we'll just go with questions and answers and get some information here. So the first panelist I'd like to introduce, and I'll let her give her story, is Johanna Doherty. She graduated in 2006.
And thanks for joining us tonight. Again, as Julie said, Johanna Doherty, I graduated from Trinity in 2006, and I was a political science major with a minor in legal studies. So I actually graduated not with the intention to go into finance, but I'll give you more on that. Today, I lead investor relations and marketing at JLL Partners, which is a middle market private equity firm based in New York City. Since I know the primary audience of the webinar tonight is Trinity students, I wanted to just take a minute and tell you what a middle market private equity firm is. So at the simplest level of private equity firms, which Julie mentioned she had a long career in, are investment firms that invest in privately owned companies. So when a private equity firm buys a company, the goal is for them to grow and expand the business and sell it at a higher price, ideally a much higher price, and generate returns for their underlying investors. There are private equity funds that invest in small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses, and frankly, everything in between. And a middle market private equity fund is generally investing in those middle, medium-sized businesses, again, with the goal of growing them into much larger companies. Within a private equity firm, you have different skill sets. You have the investment team, the people responsible for making the investments. You have back office functions like accounting and legal, and then you have investor relations. So you can think of investor relations as the liaison who sits between the investment team, the people making the investments, and the firm's underlying investors. At most private equity firms, the underlying investors are what we call, and Julie mentioned, institutional investors, which means it's not high net worth individuals, it is state pension plans like the state of Connecticut, or an endowment like the Trinity College endowment. And so it's the responsibility of the investor relations team to keep the underlying investors updated on what's happening with their investment, but also the responsibility to go out and market to prospective new investors and generally raise money for the firm when they're raising new funds. Prior to my current position at JLL, I held investor relations roles at another private equity fund, and before that at a hedge fund. Again, if it's helpful for the Trinity folks on the line, while a private equity fund invests in private companies, a hedge fund is making investments in the public markets or stocks. So many of the day-to-day responsibilities of investor relations are the same. However, the big difference is that the underlying investments the firm is making are directly in the stock market, and again, have a lot more volatility because of that, or can have a lot more volatility, depends. Now, I've been out of college a long time, but the folks hosting the panel tonight said it was important to note where we initially got started out of Trinity. My first job out of Trinity was actually an executive assistant on the trading floor of a hedge fund. In 2006, the job market was very different, but the short story is I started in an entry-level administrative role. I kept begging to take on more responsibility, and eventually the firm agreed, and they sent me back to school to take a couple of finance classes, which I had not taken at Trinity. In hindsight, that was a mistake, but financial statement analysis, accounting, etc. And eventually I moved into a research assistant position at the hedge fund, which allowed me to get my foot into investor relations. Unfortunately, I think that entry-level positions are a lot harder to come by these days. So some of our younger panelists, I know Peace and maybe McKenzie will have a lot more perspective on how to navigate the job market these days.
Thank you, Johanna. That was a wonderful introduction to private equity and also your background. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we're going to go next to McKenzie Jones. She graduated Trinity in 2015.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is McKenzie Jones, and like Julie said, I graduated from Trinity in 2015. I double majored in economics and classics, and I played soccer as well. And I know at least one of my former teammates is on right now, so shout out to them. So I currently work at Mellon Investments, and Mellon is an investment manager that's based in Boston, and that has about 670 billion in assets under management. And what that means is we manage that amount of money for our clients in our investment strategies and solutions. And that's across a wide variety of asset classes, including equity, fixed income, and multi-asset. And so that's who I work for. But in terms of what I do, I work in business development, doing institutional sales for the West Coast territory. And what that means is I'm responsible for marketing our investment strategies to institutional investors and building relationships with them and ultimately getting them to invest in our funds and become a client of Mellon's. And I know Johanna touched on this, but basically an institutional investor just means like an organization that invests a pool of money on behalf of other people. And so one example of an institutional investor would actually be Trinity College. If you think of their endowment, they need to invest that money in their endowment to meet both their current and future needs. And so institutions like Trinity look to managers like Mellon to assist them with that. And they allocate money to managers for them to invest. And so a typical day for me typically involves prospect meetings. So prior to COVID, that meant a lot of travel. I would go visit my prospects in person, go to their offices, meet with their teams. But during COVID, that just means a lot of virtual meetings. And I essentially just talk to them about our capabilities and focus a lot on the investment strategy that they're most interested in and that fits their current needs. And I typically have someone from our investment team with me as a resource to the prospect, and so that they're able to get really granular on a certain topic with the prospect. And so I need to be licensed to do what I do. I have my Series 7, 63, and 3. But beyond that, I also got my CFA, and it's an additional credential that's not necessarily required, but I feel like it gives me a lot of credibility when I'm talking to prospects, and also just serves as like a really good foundation of knowledge that I tap into on a regular basis. And so I definitely recommend that if anyone's thinking about starting to study for that, or is just thinking about it in general. So yeah, I know I covered a lot there. That's kind of a summary of who I work for, what I currently do, and I'm sure we're going to get into more questions around that, but I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, McKenzie. That was terrific. And Peace is our most recent graduate, Peace Kabari, class of 2020, and interested to learn about your background.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'm very appreciative of the turnout. So my name is Peace Kabari, and I graduated in 2020. I majored in economics and I minored in religious studies. On campus, I was on the women's basketball team, track and field, and I was also a member of other groups like First Gen, Pride, and the Investment Club. And over my college summers, I worked on campus as a camp counselor for the Dream Camp, and I also interned at Citi in the summer of my junior year, where I rotated on desks like research sales, high yield research, and FX trading. So now I've received my full-time offer at Citi, and I've been there for the past year working in prime finance sales. Our clients, which are mainly hedge funds, asset managers, and pension funds, we help to finance their strategies by lending them stock, lending them money, and clearing and settling their trades.
Thank you so much, Peace. Very interesting. So I think what we'll do is kick off with a question for our panelists. So, I'm always curious, even when I meet folks who are 20 years into their career, how did they get into finance? What was their first job? How did they get that interview? And how was Trinity part of it? And kind of what were the important aspects? So I'll put that out to the panelists and let someone pick that up and answer, and we could follow on to that.
I'll start, but I'm not a story for people to live by. So as I mentioned, I was a political science major and legal studies minor, and I actually was, when I graduated, looking at jobs predominantly to be a paralegal. However, it ties back to Trinity because I wanted to live in New York with my Trinity friends. And as I was doing paralegal interviews, I said, this just isn't going to cut in terms of being able to pay my rent. I need to look elsewhere, which led me to look for jobs in finance. I actually got my first job through a temp agency, which again is very unique. And one of the key things I think in getting my first job, it was not actually my background in finance or anything I did at Trinity, but was a lot of, I think, my written and oral communication skills, which they were very focused on in the role and the firm that I was hiring. They actually did a personality test when they brought on new folks. And so it was some of those kind of more intangibles that I think got me the job as opposed to specific skill sets. So again, I didn't want to kick off because I don't think that that's a story to live by, but that's my story.
All right, McKenzie.
Mine's also very unique, and I don't know if it's quite unique, but basically over the summers during college, I used to coach the boys varsity soccer team at my high school. And it turns out their full-time coach, who I was close with, he had a close friend at BNY Mellon. And so a couple weeks before graduation in 2015, I received an email saying that BNY was looking for someone in an entry-level position that was interested in doing kind of a sales support role. And I jumped at the opportunity, and he had indicated that he remembered I majored in economics. So I think the takeaway there is just to network whenever you can, and to be as open as possible to talking to anyone, because you never know where your next lead's going to come from.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And Peace, do you have any tidbits there?
Yeah, and to what Johanna said, but I actually think that the best stories are the most unique stories. And you'll actually find, especially in industry now, they are looking for those unique experiences, because we found that has actually translated to P&L. my background, so when I came to Trinity, I actually think I wanted to be either a lawyer or a teacher, which is two very opposite ends. But when I first came in, and it's being a liberal arts school, you get 2 years to sort of decide what track you want to go down. And for me, it was actually my mentor in the first year class, I'm forgetting the moniker, but essentially he majored in economics, and I heard from everyone in the class that it's super hard, and don't go there if you want a 4.0. And because I'm hard-headed, I thought I tried anyways, and so so I decided to major in economics, but I had no idea what I wanted that to translate into. As I mentioned before, I was actually a camp counselor for a good 2 years. I'm working with kids, very far from finance, but the hours are actually the same. So when I got to Trinity and, I decided to go down that economics path, by come summer of sophomore year, everyone sort of asks you what you want to do when you're older. And I had no idea, but I had kept in touch with my my mentor, EJ, and he had talked about working at either a private equity fund or something of that nature. And I had no idea what that was initially, but I wanted to learn more. So I went to one of the panels that Trinity hosts. I believe it's called From Summit Street to Wall Street, and Severn was hosting that. And I remember attending and seeing everyone's resumes and sort of what they did, and I thought it was really cool, but I thought I could never do that. And this is a testament to really being hard-headed and really confident in the direction that you want to go, because funny story, and I tell this to Severn all the time, when I first came up to her with my resume and my GPA that was not a 4.0, but better than a 3, so in that range, she was like, this may not be the best path for you. So I was actually, I was a little sad, but what I learned from basketball and track and field is being resilient and really like pushing through. So I came back the next year and I was in that program. And we actually, funny enough, I reconnected with Severn, and I was actually having difficulty during that program. It was mainly catered towards investment banking, and I kind of found it boring. And I wanted something that was a bit more dynamic, that really catered to my personality. So I met with Severn in her office, and she recommended joining sales and trading, and that she had a connection at Citi of someone who was an MD in FX and really wanted women to join the program. They had a women's mentorship program. And so I put my application through, actually ended up in the women's mentorship program because they were specifically looking for women at liberal arts colleges who get that well-rounded experience. Most of the time, the applications that they're getting are from business schools and people who are more quantitatively focused. However, we believe that the advantage of being at a liberal arts school is that you are well-rounded, you're able to communicate well and write well, and you won't believe how far that will actually get you. So that's sort of how I got into sales and trading. I ended up getting the internship where I rotated in research sales, FX trading, and high yield research, and I really loved it and I wanted to come back. So I happened to receive the full-time offer as well, and that's how I landed here today.
It's a great story. I'm happy to learn all of that. It's really interesting. And I knew Severn, and she was always connecting students, so that was amazing. And I know Trinity has a program today at the Career Center. Anita, for the students on the line, is focused on business finance and consulting careers. And so Anita D. Carlin, and you could reach out to her and get a lot of that, sounds like individualized attention that piece got, and kind of was able to power through and get into her career in finance. So I was going to ask a question of each of you, or whoever wants to answer, about mentors maybe that you found at your firm or outside your firm that have helped you kind of move along in your career and reach those goals and get to those next levels as you've wanted to along the way. So, whoever wants to kick off, but a mentor question.
Yeah, so I have a couple of mentors, and I've found that the best mentors so far in my career have been people that I've developed relationships with very naturally. It hasn't been, and this isn't to say that these sort of things don't work, but it hasn't been for me through kind of the something that the organization puts out and says, okay, we're going to connect a mentor and mentee, and you're going to meet on a weekly basis. For me, the mentors that have had such a great impact on my career, it's been more of a natural relationship that has been built over time. And so I've just found that I've developed relationships with certain people, and I've just stayed in front of them, and I've met with them and just talked to them on a regular basis, even if they move firms, even if they're no longer kind of working in the same vicinity as me. Just always getting their opinion on certain things and always bouncing ideas off them. It's just really important to hear other perspectives and get an objective opinion on certain things you're considering, whether it's a career move or something, a difficult issue that you're facing at work, or just a general question that you have. So I think they play an integral role, and I think they certainly have. I have some mentors that have just played a really big role in my career, and I owe them a lot for that.
Thanks, McKenzie. And I'll say about mentors, I end up mentoring folks younger than me in careers in finance, private equity, VC. I didn't find a mentor in the business world. I was talking with coaches and other people that I knew, but really hadn't found one in my exact field of work. And so it's kind of using that greater network. And some of those folks were Trinity folks, whether they were in insurance or other roles, but found it to be really helpful along the way, and happy to do that for women in finance today. Johanna, were you going to add?
I was just going to say, earlier in my career, I worked at a number of large firms. And I think that one of the great things about working at a larger firm, especially when you're younger, there's a ton to be learned from all the different groups at the firm. But I also think that it's a great ground to meet different people. And as McKenzie said, develop natural relationships with people generally more senior to you, who you look up to and admire and are willing to help you out as you navigate your career. And I think, especially as women in the finance field, if you can find someone who you kind of see doing a really amazing job a couple of years or many years your senior, and ask them for advice in terms of looking for a promotion, asking for more money, whether you're going to have kids and, or one of the only women at the firm to have kids. Like I've had a couple of folks who've just been hugely helpful to me throughout my career as I navigated all those different things, and gave me great advice, and were great sounding boards along the way.
Great, thanks, Joanna. Peace, anything to add?
Sure. I 100% agree with the point about having mentors that you naturally connect with. Those people are the most important, because those are going to be your advocates for rooms that you may not be privy to. But I would also like to add that it's important to have mentors that maybe you don't naturally connect with, be it maybe some professors with certain grades that you like or don't like, but those people are important. Why? Because you're going to work with different personalities throughout your life, and you need to be able to go to your boss and give them an answer, and if it's wrong, you're going to go back, correct it, and give them the right answer. And so these people are super important. Whether or not their classes are harder, I would say lean towards those harder classes, because it really sets you up, I would say, for life. Facing challenges, getting over them, learning how to work with different personalities. I would say just make sure that you do have people who encourage you, push you, motivate you, support you, but also have people who are hard and strict, because I just think that gives you the best balance.
Awesome, I agree. Especially early in your career, kind of having those different perspectives. So my next question we touched on a little bit, and that's about having a liberal arts degree in finance. And so, we touched upon it, and it's about communicating and being able to write and express yourself both on paper and in a meeting. So maybe tell us all about the benefits of a liberal arts career, and then or liberal arts background in a finance career. So, let you guys speak to that.
I feel like you're able to provide a different perspective on a lot of things. You're not walking, or a lot of people that you'll meet within the finance world have an economics background or a finance background, but maybe didn't attend a liberal arts school and don't have such a well-rounded educational background. And I find a lot of firms are looking for that well-rounded person and want different perspectives and want that different background to provide different insights into a certain topic. So yeah, it gives you a kind of a unique edge.
Sometimes I find it's thinking critically and not actually even answering the question that was asked, but coming at it from a completely different angle. And
Right.
saying, I wouldn't even do it that way. I'd take a look at this, or did you analyze this other piece of it that's not presented here? And I always found that, yeah, I was thinking of things from a different standpoint. A lot of the times you had your pure business schools, you had your accountants, and you had your MBAs. And having the bachelor's and master's in economics and the liberal arts background was definitely unique.
And in what I do, at least personally, again, written and verbal communication is kind of what differentiates somebody from kind of being a mediocre investor relations person, I think, to being a lot more powerful in their role. And I think, a big part of what we do is we take what the investment team does, more of the analytical work, and then we kind of regurgitate it into normal person speak. And so I think a lot of having a liberal arts background, not being so kind of focused always just on the number side and so analytical in my approach to everything has been a huge asset to me as I've kind of gone through my career.
Yeah, and to build on that, in my perspective, and granted I was no math major, but I did feel like the more quantitative side of things really just gave you, this is the answer, this is how you do it, you're solving for a solution. But I felt like, minoring in religious studies really gave me a room where people had completely opposing views and there was no right answer. And I feel like this really leads you to be a lot more creative and dynamic in the workspace, because you're not looking down, okay, well, this is what the regulators say. Can we interpret it in a way that we can go back to them and say, well, we think we can finance it this way, and this is actually better for markets. This is how we communicate with our credit team, and balancing different opposing views between our IBR team and our funding team and the sales team, as well as the traders, because everyone has their own motivation. However, we have found within our program at Citi that the more liberal arts catered students found a way to the solution versus going down what the normal path that everyone's been going down for the past 50 or so years. So I would really say that a liberal arts education is beneficial because you're in classrooms that challenge your views, and it's not specifically quantitative.
Yep. So,
sorry, if I could just jump in.
Go ahead, Delaney.
So in the application process and everything, I know that it's a little bit hard for students with a liberal arts background if they're asked technical questions or something like that, because we don't have that business background. So did you guys find any trouble with that? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Good question. Back in the day, it was a lot of internships or taking an accounting class or something like that. I think today there's summer programs for liberal arts students to do in finance, but I will let the younger folks speak to that.
Peace is probably the best person to answer this question, but I think that in general, a lot of times when people ask analytical questions in interviews, what they're not just focused on the answer, they're focused on seeing the steps that you take to get there. And so I think that sometimes if you're in an interview process and they ask you that type of question, if you walk through what you might, how you might go about solving it, that's kind of what they're looking to see. And not everybody has the answer to it. And so that's a good way to approach it, even if you don't know the answer off the top of your head.
Yeah, and to build on that, Joanna's exactly right. It's all about trying to show how you would problem solve. So, for example, you may have a question thrown at you during a super day, for example, that may be quantitative in nature. However, economics is really all about human behavior. So what would you as a human being naturally do to hedge your risk? What is your upside and what is your downside? I feel like liberal arts really gives you the language behind that to really explain what your view is, and they can always teach you the numbers later. Most of you know, it may seem like people go to business schools have a leg up, but that's not really the case. There's not much you actually can learn from your undergraduate program that they won't teach you on the job. And they just want to know that, are you a person they can sit next to you for 12 to 16 hours a day? And are you a person that has decent enough reasoning skills? Everything else can really be taught.
Yeah, I agree with that, with what both Joanna and Peace said. And also, like, there's so many resources out there that you can utilize. And this doesn't necessarily speak to the exact issue that you brought up, Delaney, but for instance, going for the CFA, because I didn't get that technical education from Trinity, the CFA was something that I was able to study a lot and teach myself about those more technical terms that I can use on a regular basis in communicating these investments to prospects. So yeah, just utilizing external resources and like Julie said, internships and courses and stuff over the summer.
Great. So I have another question about advice. And so since we've got students, you know, on the Zoom, and I always wondered when I saw people out in the work world, how did they get there? What advice would they give me? What would they do differently in finding their career? And what would they maybe not worry about so much? So I'm going to put that out there to the panelists.
There's a lot of layers in that one, Julie.
I could start and say I should have trusted my instincts and been comfortable with speaking up, because I saw some things play out where I just didn't say what I thought about an investment or an investment decision or a manager or a deal. And then lo and behold, 2 years later, exactly what I thought happened. And I was like, I should have spoken up. And so I guess if I could give my early career younger self some advice, I would say to kind of trust my instincts and have a seat at the table and speak up in a way that's meaningful. If I had that sense. So.
Two like tidbits that advice people gave me over time, which that I've kind of thought about a lot over my career. The first is, one is to, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, is to always do the job of what is the person above you doing and try to do that job for them. And that will help give you a leg up as you kind of work through your career. So if you see all the things that your boss is working on and they just give you kind of A to do, but you know that after A, you have to do B and C, do A, B, and C. And that always, I think that shows that you can take on a lot more responsibility and do a lot more. And I think that's something that has proven valuable to me. And also be an advocate for yourself. I went to a women in finance type of breakfast when I was pretty young. And one of the things they said was a lot of times women put their heads down, work really hard and expect to see results. And that's not always how the world turns, unfortunately. And so find people within your organization who can be an ally for you, who can be a mentor for you, who can help you navigate your career, and don't try to go at it alone. Try to kind of recruit a team to help you along the way.
That's awesome, Joanna.
Yeah, that's great. I completely agree with everything you just said. That was really great advice. And then on top of that, just and I think this goes without saying, but just to be as like open-minded as possible, and to learning, to meeting people, to just be a sponge. And I think something that's helped me is to just early on in my career to not pigeonhole myself right away, and to try and remain open to new ideas, and to learn about as many kind of career paths as I possibly can, so that I make a really educated decision on what I want to do. And so I think that's really important. And yeah, that's about it.
I think it's an interesting question, because I feel like my opinion on this is constantly changing. I'm in between, don't be afraid to make a lot of mistakes and then also don't make any mistakes at all. So I guess what my thinking on this, don't be afraid to take that project. Don't be afraid to present. Don't be afraid of saying something really dumb. The goal, obviously, as you go into an interview is to make as few mistakes as possible and speak to the things you know. But, if you were too afraid of, whether it was taking that class or applying to that job, if you were too afraid of failing, you certainly wouldn't be where you are today, and you have no idea where your future could lead to. So that's just my small piece of advice. Whether or not you think that you'll be there for 5, 10, 15 years, if it's something you want to try out, I would say really just go for it. Of course, prep ahead of time. Just to get, background knowledge and have a general idea, but just because you don't know something doesn't mean you can't learn. And it's okay to ask people questions on things that you aren't fully certain about.
That's a very good point about asking questions. Absolutely. So our audience has asked a question of McKenzie, actually. So when did you take the 3 CFA exams, and how long did it take to fully study and pass the exams? So I guess for perspective, how many years were you out of Trinity? Maybe how old were you? And maybe at what title in your career as well?
Okay, so first of all, when I started studying for the CFA, I didn't even know if I could pass the first one. It was kind of like a scary endeavor. Because it's very intimidating. A lot of people try and get it. And it took me only a year and a half to pass all 3. I did level 1 in December, level 2 the following June, and level 3 the following June. So I did it extremely quick. I don't necessarily advise you to do it like that. I kind of wanted to rip the Band-Aid off and get it done with. I was an associate when I started studying. I was about 2 years out of college. And at that time, I had a good amount of time to allocate to studying. My job wasn't too demanding. That changed very quickly. So I started doing institutional sales. And so I was also, like a year into studying for the CFA, I was traveling a lot and just studying on planes. But I think it's something that is absolutely worth pursuing. I learned so much. And also employers, when they see that you have the CFA, it's not necessarily about what you learned, but while that's very important, it's more about what you can learn and what you're capable of. And so I think it really shows that you created this framework around studying and that you have a strong work ethic and that you can apply that to different areas of your career. And so it's also, I've found being a part of like the CFA societies, like CFA Boston, and it's a really great networking opportunity. So I attend a lot of events there and have met a lot of great people through that as well. So I couldn't recommend the CFA enough. I had a great experience with it.
And can I follow up and ask, how many of your peers have the CFA, and is it typical in your role, or is it something above and beyond?
So it's definitely not typical in my role. It's more typical on the investment side of things, but I found that it couldn't hurt. It helps in my discussions with CIOs at pension plans. So it's definitely more unique in a business development role. But I find a lot of my peers are pursuing it. It's just a matter of time and when they're able to accomplish all 3.
And did your firm support you?
Yes, so that's a huge thing. I don't know if I could have done it if they didn't. So they supported me financially for all 3 exams. And so that's a really important question because most firms will support you. And then the last thing I'll say is I utilized this is not a plug, but Kaplan has really great resources on it, and making sure that your firm supports you and buying those extra resources that are required, like the classes and everything.
That's great. Thank you, McKenzie.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'd just like to add that is incredibly above and beyond. I just think you're underselling yourself, McKenzie. The CFA is, it's really pretty much a status symbol, I would say, in the world of finance. It's really hard to achieve. It takes many years, and for you to have done it in that time is incredible. If you are a current student and you're interested in learning what the CFA is and what they do. I was a part of a CFA presentation for the CFA Society of Hartford. I believe it's run on campus through Professor Hoag, who is amazing. So if you are a current student and you're interested in learning more, definitely contact Professor Hoag.
That's great perspective. Gosh, I don't know that the CFA was on my radar even when I got the master's degree way back when. And then, of course, the traditional MBA programs that folks do, if they go to an analyst program in investment banking and it's a couple of years, and then they kind of leave to go get their MBA and then go on to their next endeavor. So I will ask, because I was one of very few women at the table when I was in private equity and VC secondaries. I will ask, how many women are at the table in your firm? How many team members are women? And do you find being a woman today is challenging? Do you think there's obstacles? Kind of what's the environment like today? Because it was, you know, we had to wear skirt suits and hose those years ago. So, you know, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I would imagine that the students on the Zoom today are interested to hear what it's like out there.
I'll start. I work at, as I mentioned, a smaller firm now. I came up in my career working at a number of larger firms where there were a lot more women. I'll speak to right now. I'm one of 3 women who work at my firm. We have one woman on the investment team who's junior, and our controller who works in accounting is a woman. There's only 2 working moms at our firm, which is kind of a whole other can of worms. We could spend more time on that another day. But there's still a huge underrepresentation of women in finance. I would say that I've been able to kind of create my own route, my own role, and I don't feel like I've ever missed an opportunity because of being a woman, but I do think that it is a different road to navigate being a woman, especially at a smaller private equity firm versus a man. And you have to have confidence, you have to have tough skin, you have to not take things personally. And I think, you know, as you learn a lot as you grow, and you know, I love what I do and where I work. And so it's all kind of par for the course at this point, but it's definitely, there's still complexities of it. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. The world hasn't totally changed. They're not as well, I don't think, as welcoming to women as the industry professes itself to be, though maybe some of our younger panelists feel differently.
Thanks, Joanna. Yes, I'm interested in McKenzie and Peace and your perspectives.
So where I work, there's definitely not as many women as I would like to see. I often look around the table, like physically look around the table, and I'm one of the, if not only, woman at the table. And so that's definitely unfortunate. And also just in terms of obstacles, like, and this also speaks to what Joanna brought up when she was talking about her advice. I often find myself, even though it's extremely uncomfortable, advocating for myself and asking for something and speaking up for myself. And even though it goes against like almost everything in me, because you kind of don't want to make a scene, you don't want to step on toes, but it is so important to get out of your comfort zone and do that, because you have to assume that you're fighting for yourself, and not many other people are. And so it's really important to speak up for yourself. And yeah, I mean, I definitely would love to see more women involved, especially, I mean, I guess on both the investment side of things and the business development side of things. Similar to Joanna, like the firms in investment management and finance tend to talk the talk, but not necessarily walk the walk in terms of getting more women involved. And so I think that's something that is turning out to be kind of a passion of mine, and something that I think that's why I'm here talking today, and hoping to meet more women through this and help them in any way that I can.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I agree that the industry as a whole isn't exactly representative. I do think I've been extremely lucky to work in the business that I'm currently in, because half of our sales team, they're women. Our MD on the greater floor is a woman within Prime, but also our CEO, Jane Fraser of Citigroup, is also a woman. So I do feel like I've been pretty lucky in that sense, but of course that wouldn't have been the case if it weren't for women who looked around the room and said, you know, this needs to change. And also being a woman of color on top of that is a completely different story. But again, within my specific business, I think they do a really decent job of having affiliation groups and networks that you can use internally to bounce ideas off of each other, or network with groups that you're also different than. We actually have a women's leadership council there as well called RISE. And right now, what I think is pretty cool, I just wanted to highlight really quickly, they're pushing for women who have children, and for men, obviously, who have children. They're pushing for more men to participate in the paternity leave program. We found that this has actually helped women overall feel more comfortable taking it. So just happy that, you know, we have initiatives like that. I'd also like to credit some of that, I guess, being more comfortable on the floor with my time on Trinity Track and Field. As you know, with the track and field team, the men and women practice together, we compete together. And I've kind of been a tomboy a lot of my life. So hanging out with the guys in the office has sort of been a bit, it felt a bit easier on my part, but that's not to say that the group right now we have is currently representative. I do think that needs to change.
Thank you, Peace. And we do have one question in the Q&A. I think it's going to be one more question. It'll be our last question. And so we have an attendee asking our panelists, what authors, books, podcasts would you recommend for professional growth and personal growth? So I will let you guys answer that question.
The first thing that comes to mind, for at least personal growth, and I think everything personal applies to your professional life as well, but David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, I think it's an incredible book about, it touches on so many different aspects of life, and I think it's a really great read if you haven't read it already.
Why don't you put that in the chat for us so we can.
Okay.
Thanks, McKenzie. That's awesome. All right, Joanna.
I don't have any great recommendations. I have been derelict in any recent reading on professional or personal growth, to be honest.
So, you know, along the way, I was always reading the biographies of female entrepreneurs. And I still love to do that. I guess it's kind of personal and business, but I love to read, you know, about how women got started in the business, whether it's VC or even, you know, Katharine Graham with the Washington Post, or it's just kind of their stories, you know, at the board table and kind of how it evolved. So I'll put that out there.
Julie, that does remind me, one podcast that I like that's sort of along those lines is the Wall Street Journal does a podcast. It's like a 30-minute episode. The name is a little tacky, but it's called Secrets of Wealthy Women. And it's about successful women, basically in, I'll say, business generally, and just about their careers, their success stories. And that's one that I've enjoyed listening to over time.
Awesome. Yeah. And one of the books I'll recommend is Alpha Girls. It's about the early days in VC and tech. So that's an awesome one. Peace, anything from you?
I guess I'm a bit derelict in that way too. I prefer audiobooks actually, but in the way of motivational speakers, two of them are actually men. So I would say Robin Sharma and Tony Robbins are two of my personal favorites. But I think the most important motivation you can have are really surrounding yourself around with people who are going in the direction that you want, or with people who are better than you, most importantly. And so in that sense, you would really want to leverage, and my lighting is going crazy right now, but you really want to leverage the women who are ahead of you, right? So whether that's at school and it's the woman who's doing great in class, or on your athletics teams, or in any clubs that you're in, really work together with them, because they can only help you. Obviously, they know how to get to where they are, so they can give you that sort of background and feedback as well, and motivate you too. And I would say the women at work, for me personally, when someone is in your immediate space, you're better able to follow in their footsteps. So really try to get your motivation from the people around you, and surround yourself with positive people who are going in that direction, because that will have the most immediate impact on your life than maybe someone that you just listened to, or are simply reading in a book. Really try to have real people in front of you who are living real lives and can give you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's awesome, Peace. Thank you. And I also want to congratulate you. I understand you were named one of the 50 for the next 50 for Trinity College. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. And then I just want to thank our panelists. We're going to have to wrap up. This is a great conversation, and I'm so encouraged by our Women in Finance and Delaney with Women in Business. So I want to thank everyone who participated in the audience, and again, thank our panelists, and thank Melissa for putting this together, and the WLC. And if you'd like to join, please contact the college, contact Melissa Regan. She's going to post a link in the chat to share a survey about the event, and there'll be a recording and follow up from the college. So thank you all, and enjoy your Tuesday evening.